Well, here we are again, guys. Trapped in a world where it's our job to please a group of people who have an IQ of 3 and the gaming skills of a feline. It's starting to get rather frustrating when it's hard to please this generation's gamers and even harder to compete with this generation's developers. This shooter craze has gotten out of hand and we can't seem to get noticed. So you know what? To hell with trying to please these ungrateful, whiny, bitchy idiots that gave themselves the title of gamer because they knew no one else would. If they're gonna be idiots, then we're gonna treat them that way. And you know what? We're gonna have fun doing it. Scenario 3. Now, fooling the ignorant is quite easy to do. It was really easy in the past because the people that were being fooled were us, and most of us were kids then. Fooling us simply required a new gimmick and a way to make us believe we were better by following said gimmick. However, as we've seen this generation, that same gimmick can work on adults. Pretty pathetic, isn't it? What is this generation's main gimmick? What really makes people feel the same way we did when we were first introduced to Sonic the Hedgehog and felt that his attitude was much more badass, so we were also much more badass when we played the games featuring him? That's actually quite easy to answer. Most of you might say people feel superior when they argue over what console is the best, and while that is quite humorous, it isn't the answer. The main gimmick can easily be answered with two words: Scenario 1. We know shooters are easy to play and pretty much brought in a giant casual group, but we have to ask ourselves one important question. Why is it that the same type of people who used to make fun of gamers suddenly got sucked into gaming when the shooter gimmick exploded? Why not before that? We've always had casual games, but why was this one casual genre enough to bring in a whole new crowd? The answer is very simple. We just have to put two and two together. First, take the thought process of, I'm much more badass than any nerdy gamer out there. Then, add to that thought process, shooting guns makes me more badass. And you end up with the results. I'm much more badass than any nerdy gamer out there, and I'm gonna prove it by playing games involving me shooting guns. Or you could say it a different way. The shooter generation. That's right, guys. This whole generation is pretty much shoot gun, even if in some cases it isn't a shooter. Now, attempting this requires a little bit of thought. If you think about the other two cool gimmicks, if you will, you'll notice something strange. The first cool gimmick with Sonic the Hedgehog, if you really look at it, was planned out. In the 90s, rap really exploded and a lot of people began to follow it, so Sonic's cool theme and hip-hop music in his games was all it took. Add to that a little speed, no, not the drug, and a term that most of us said but didn't understand: blast processing. And there you have it. It was a plan that Sega perfectly timed and perfectly executed. However, the second cool gimmick with shooters was pure luck. Shooters exploding with the original Xbox wasn't planned at all. Halo was nothing more than a game that saved Microsoft's ass by being the only game needed to keep the Xbox going. Nobody knew that shooters would explode then, and to a lot of us it was just another game. But we were wrong. It was a hell of a lot more than that. It was the start of a new cool gimmick that nobody saw coming. Think about this, guys. Why is it that no matter how many new Sonic games they make, Sonic's cool gimmick no longer works? Simple. The only reason why Sonic's cool gimmick doesn't work now is because of his image and the fact that our thought process has changed. What we thought was cool back then is no longer cool now. As kids, we bought the idea of a cool hedgehog even though most of us probably had no idea what the hell a hedgehog really was. But as an adult, a cool hedgehog? Seriously? No. Look at this picture and answer this question. When you think of cool, is this even remotely close to what pops into your head? I rest my case. Even though a lot of us still enjoy the old school Sonic games today, the gimmick is no longer there. However, a gimmick with guns? That can work for an entire lifetime. And because this gimmick has pretty much taken over this generation, trying to change people's interests means we would have to get the exact same people that thought they were cool for playing shooters to feel cool for playing something else. There are a lot of games out there that people would consider kiddie, and while some of them really are, others are only given that title due to their appearance. However, if we made the exact same game but changed its look, we could easily fool people into thinking our game is for grown-ups when they wouldn't even realize that they were playing the exact same game and we just screwed them out of $60 because they thought they had a game for big boys when really they had a game that was the same as the other game they just called kiddie but was simply disguised as a game for adults. It's actually quite simple. Here, I'll show you how. First, we take a game like Kirby's Epic Yarn. I chose this because it actually does have a very kiddie look to it. Now, let's change Kirby into your generic, oh look at me, I'm badass because I make ugly faces type of character. Then, let's change the enemies into your average evil dark demon of death type creatures. Now, give the main character the exact same powers as Kirby, so he can absorb enemies and then use their powers. Change the background and make it dark. Then, throw in a little blood and a swear word here and there. And give it some dark music. And there you have it. A hardcore dark evil game of extreme. A game that a lot of gamers this generation would be too stupid to realize is the exact same game that they once called kiddie. Notice that creating this game took hardly any thought whatsoever, mainly because we took one idea and changed its image. So if you guys are ever playing a game and you say to yourself, I feel like I've played this before, chances are it's because you have. Now, we've made the game, but how do we get others to feel like they're cooler for playing our game? They may be stupid enough to think our game is for adults, but now we need to take advantage of even more stupidity. We need to fool them the same way Sega fooled us. However, when it comes to that part, it's difficult to fool adults by forcing them into liking a new gimmick. Trying to force them will simply make them hate it. We can't just say, play our game, it'll make you more of an adult, as they wouldn't fall for that. This is why a lot of YouTubers sound rather ridiculous when they say specific games are for adults when the game consists of blood, swear words, or shooting. The game isn't meant for adults. It's meant to fool kids into thinking they are more adult-like for playing it. How this tactic works so well has less to do with the intelligence of a developer and more to do with the stupidity of some adult gamers. So for developers, what would have been a problem of the kids we were fooling became adults and now we can't fool them anymore, suddenly became a solution of the adults we thought we couldn't fool are still falling for the same trick. So it ended up working out quite well for them. While some adult gamers have grown past that, the ones you want to fool are the ones that have a simple thought process of adult theme equals adult gamer. If a child plays a game meant for children, it doesn't make them more of a child. If an adult plays a game they think is made for adults and feels superior for playing it, it doesn't make them more of an adult, it makes them more of an idiot for falling for the same trick twice. In other words, playing a game with an adult theme as an adult simply means you're an adult playing a video game. And that is what we need to take advantage of. The only problem with the cool gimmick is that it only works when your audience doesn't notice what it is you're really trying to do with your games and are too blind to tell when they are and aren't playing the same game. In other words, the cool gimmick only works when we have idiots in the gaming world. And as you can see this generation, it's full of them. So it should be no surprise that this gimmick worked out so well, especially when the people it worked on most are adults. We may not be able to guarantee that we can beat the shooter gimmick, but we can at least fool a lot of others with the cool gimmick, because while it may not work the same way it did before, it still works. However, this means that just like Scenario 2, we don't want to develop for the Wii here either. People may brag that the game is on the Wii, but majority wouldn't play it. They simply don't care for that gimmick. Now, this doesn't mean that everybody who plays games with an adult theme are this way. I'm only referring to those who believe they are more of an adult because they play it. Most of us will play games with adult themes because it's a game and we find it entertaining. Others will play it because for them, it's a social status. You know, like it used to be for us. This is why these people make sure to tell everyone, especially on YouTube, that they play games made for adults. It's kind of like swear words. As kids, it was cool to say them because we were constantly told not to. As adults, it's in our everyday language. We say them so much now that most of the time we don't even realize we're saying them. With games, it works the same way. When we were introduced to blood and gore and swear words in games, most of us were kids and would normally be told that that kind of stuff wasn't meant for us, which pretty much made us want to play it even more. As adults, we've seen it so much now that it isn't really anything new. In the end, guys, it's quite obvious that games just aren't as fun as they used to be, and that the gaming community, which was once a proud group of people who enjoyed gaming and loved talking trash to each other about who was better or who could kick whose ass at what game, has come down to a pathetic empty shell of who has the better piece of something they don't even care about. Those type of people are the easiest to fool, and while those people are being fooled, a lot of the people who aren't falling for it aren't too pleased with a lot of this generation's turnout. But if you're a developer and you knew that most of the money comes from the ignorant, then why not take advantage of them? As far as a lot of this generation's gamers are concerned, bad game plus good graphics equals elite game of epicness. Bad game plus console defending equals elite game of epicness for whatever console the game just happens to be exclusively for. Bad game plus ignorance equals this gaming generation. Would you really take game development that serious when you notice majority of gamers this generation have that mindset? How can developers try to please a crowd that can't be pleased because they don't really care that much about gaming at all? And when you're trying to find a way to please that crowd, you end up going about it all wrong. So the easiest thing to do is simply fool them. In prior generations, video games were just that, video games. In this generation, video games are nothing more than something used as a way to fight against a person or group of people as to why a specific console is better, even when said person has no intention of buying the game they spend so much time defending. Developers seem to have a lot on their plate this generation, from used game purchases to piracy. And while piracy has been around for years, let's face it, when your game development costs start hitting the million mark, that's when it really hits hard. While I hate a lot of what game developers have done this generation, it's starting to make sense why they keep doing it. It doesn't seem lazy at all. It seems smart. When a generation of gamers change, then game developer tactics have to change as well. When we all talk about what developers need to do, it's not really so much what they need to do, it's what we want them to do. Because in the end, we're not looking out for them, we're looking out for ourselves. Their job is to make the game and sell it, our job is to buy the game and play it. And it's our job to determine what we want and what we like, not theirs. That's why we have a different variety of game genres, so we can choose what we want. If people want game developers to stop doing what they're doing, then you have to get people to stop giving them reasons for doing it. It's easy for people to pin the blame for everything on the developers instead of themselves. None of us really want to look like the bad guy in this situation, but we're all guilty of some of this stuff even if we're too stubborn to admit it. I get the feeling that if GameStop never existed, or a company that does what GameStop does, some of the things developers are doing this generation wouldn't happen. But let's face it, how many of you are really going to say to yourselves, two of the same game, both are in perfect condition, and this one is $40 because it's used? Well, this is a simple solution. I'll get the $60 copy. A lot of us can't just cough up money for games as we have our own budgets to look out for. And when it comes down to looking out for the game developers versus looking out for ourselves, it makes sense that a lot of us will get the used copy, even if we know we're screwing the developers over, and even if we have to make our own excuse as to why what we're doing really isn't that bad. In the end, we've all got our own reasons why we don't like the path developers have taken this generation. But you know what? I get the feeling that game developers probably don't like the path gamers have taken this generation either.